Hello there, everybody. Happy Saturday night. I'm going to go step by step through my brownie recipe, my sweet potato brownie that I wrote about 3 or 4 years ago originally, and I've kind of tweaked it. And I wanted to show you what I did. So I started with, the reason I made this recipe up was because my husband and I found out that we can't have gluten, and we don't want to do the sugar anymore because we were watching our blood levels. So I needed to come up with something healthier because we like to have our brownies every now and then. We like to have chocolate. We like to have something sweet, and we want it to be stuff that's good for us instead of stuff that's bad. So I started with a sweet potato. And the recipe calls for 10 ounces of smashed sweet potato. One of these, when I weighed them, was a pound. And I actually used the whole thing in this recipe. And you peel it. I cut it up into fours and just put it in the microwave and cooked it off. And then peeled it and mashed it up. Then I took, and I set that aside in a bowl. Then I took a half a cup of, this is sun butter. And sun butter, it'll separate, so I had to mix it up. I pulled out a half a cup and I put it in a saucepan, like this little saucepan right here. This version of the recipe, I used also a half a cup of macadamia nut. This is perfect keto that they used to put in these pouches. You can use almond butter and cashew butter. I did that the first time I made this recipe, and that was fine. I'm trying to get away from cashew. And my pantry's full of these. So I just used the nut butter I had on hand. And the key with this recipe is taking those nut butters in that saucepan and cooking them at medium heat until they start to brown on the bottom. Kind of like when you're making a gravy with flour and you're trying to brown that flour. And you'll smell the nut butter. It'll start to smell kind of brown. And you keep stirring it until it starts to stick to the pan like a flour base would for gravy, because that's what you want. It's taking the butter and making it like a flour. This recipe doesn't have any flour in it. Then what I did was I put the sweetener in it. Okay, this is Lakanto maple syrup, and it is sugar alcohol, erythritol, and monk fruit. So if you're trying to cut out your sugar, this is the best thing. It's not cheap, I'll warn you. Okay, this is a recipe with a lot of great clean ingredients, and the clean ingredients usually aren't cheap. So I used a tablespoon of that, and I used a tablespoon of the granulated monk sweetener. If you wanted to, you could use a tablespoon instead of one of those of molasses if your system can handle the sugar and the carbs. But you got to be careful with the molasses, because then the flavor will be a little more molassesy, so it just depends on what your preference is. So I added the sweeteners to the nut butters as I was melting them on the stove. And then once I got that consistency, I added it to the bowl that had the mashed sweet potato in it. And then I took a 1/4 cup of, this is organic cacao powder. Baking chocolate at the grocery store has a funky flavor because they add a lot of stuff to it. So I would recommend getting this. Costco's got their own. It's really good that I've used. This one I got from Amazon. And it's just like I said, a 1/4 cup. Then I used an entire cup of the Lily's baking chocolate. These are sweetened with stevia and erythritol. So there's like no sugar grams at all. And it's actually high in fiber, some carbs. And no, these aren't cheap either. But like I said, you're wanting to eat healthy and put better things in your body, you're going to pay a little bit more for it, and it's worth it. So I put a whole cup of these in the batter. And I put it in a corning wire dish. This is an 8x8 that I greased. And I mixed it up, cooked it for at 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. It ended up usually being about 30 minutes. And then when I pulled it out, I took another cup of the chips So you probably need to buy a couple bags of the chips and put them over the top as it was cooling. So they kind of melted in, but not entirely. So it's kind of like a frosting. And you can see how they are. And actually, you have to let the brownies completely cool. I tried to start cutting these when they were still warm, and they just totally broke. I almost called this brownie crumble because of that. But after I let them cool completely, they end up like this. So they're actually bites where you can cut them and eat them. And you see how small that is. That is like a brownie bite. Because this is organic cacao and the Lily's baking chocolates, they are very chocolatey. They're sweet too. Not overly sweet like the ones you buy at the store. But they'll easily satisfy your sweet crave and your chocolate crave without the sugar spike levels and the carb levels. And I'm going to put the entire recipe in the description box below so you have it. If you have any questions, just put it in the chat box and I'll respond. Thanks for watching.